It was just another routine delivery for me. Hey there, I'm Jenna, a college student hustling to save up some extra cash by working at a local Chinese restaurant. Every penny counts when you're trying to fund your education, you know? I'm usually pretty fearless, considering myself independent and quick on my feet. But nothing could have prepared me for what went down that night. It was way past the usual dinner rush when my boss handed me the final delivery of the night. The address led to a new housing development on the outskirts of town. Why no? One of those places where houses are still popping up, but not many folks have moved in yet. I figured it'd be a quick drop-off, then I could call it a night. But as I got closer, a sense of unease crept over me. The streets were eerily quiet, with sparse streetlights casting long shadows that stretched towards my car, passing half-built houses bathed in moonlight. The whole place felt off, like I'd stumbled into a ghost town. I tried to locate the house number I was given, but the numbering system was all wonky. It skipped over the one I needed entirely. Confusion mingled with the knot forming in my stomach, so I decided to give the customer a ring, hoping for some clarity. When I finally got through, the voice on the other end caught me off guard. The guy sounded rushed and irritated, like he'd been waiting ages. His directions were a jumble of confusion, nothing matching up with what I was seeing. The more he rambled, the more my anxiety spiked. His tone was desperate, almost frantic. What kind of place was this? After a maze of wrong turns, I finally spotted it, the house, or whatever you want to call it. It was tucked away at the end of a decrepit road, with only a flickering light hinting at life inside. It felt like a scene straight out of a horror flick, with me playing the oblivious lead. But this was real life, and I had a job to do. Stepping out of my car, I approached the door, feeling like I was walking into a trap. Before I could even knock, the door creaked open on its own, like it was beckoning me inside. The house was barely lit, a solitary flashlight pointing towards an open basement door. Shadows danced on the walls, casting a chilling atmosphere. Every fiber of my being screamed to bolt, but I had to stay composed. I fished out my phone, only to realize I had no signal. Zip, nada. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it down. This was just a delivery, I reassured myself. Drop off the food and leave. Then, I heard them faint footsteps, but not from inside the house, from outside. Peeking out, I saw figures emerging from the shadows, heading straight for me. Panic set in, but I knew I had to stay quiet, stay hidden. Darting outside, I used the construction materials as cover, my heart pounding in my ears. It was a nerve-wracking game of hide and seek, with me desperately seeking an escape route. Finally, I spotted a gap in the fence at the back of the development. With adrenaline pumping, I squeezed through, breaking into a sprint towards safety. I could hear shouts behind me as I burst through the gap, the rough edges of the fence scraping my skin. But I didn't stop until I hit the main road, bathed in the comforting glow of streetlights. Looking back, the development was silent. The figures vanished, but I knew what I had narrowly escaped. Out of the blue, a voice broke the eerie silence. It was a jogger, surprised to see someone else out late at night, especially looking as shaken as I did. He stopped in his tracks, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. I could barely muster a response, but I managed to explain that I needed to call the police. Without hesitation, he handed me his phone. My hands shook violently as I dialed 911, recounting the terrifying ordeal to the dispatcher. The jogger stayed by my side, offering comfort until the police arrived. The sound of approaching sirens was like music to my ears. I was safe. I was going to be all right. The nightmare was finally over. As the police car pulled up and the officer stepped out, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had escaped that horror, thanks to quick thinking and the kindness of a stranger. It was over, and I had survived. Afterwards, the police investigated the area, but found nothing. It was as if the whole ordeal had vanished into thin air. Yet, I knew the truth. What I experienced was real, and it terrified me to the core. The police listened to my story, albeit with skepticism. They questioned the validity of my account, suggesting it could have been a figment of my imagination. But the scratches on the fence and the sheer terror in my voice spoke volumes. That night left an indelible mark on me. It taught me to trust my instincts and showed me the strength I never knew I had. I faced a nightmare straight out of a horror movie and emerged stronger on the other side. While I can't claim to have shed all my fears, I've become more cautious. But I've also gained confidence in my ability to handle adversity, no matter how daunting. That night taught me to cherish life and never take my safety for granted. I'm grateful for the jogger who came to my aid and for my own resilience that saw me through. Though it was a harrowing experience, It shaped me into who I am today. Now, shifting gears, let me introduce myself. I'm Emily, residing in my cozy apartment nestled in a serene part of town. Memories of my days as a food critic adorn my walls, with framed articles showcasing my reviews that could make or break a restaurant's reputation. My kitchen shelves boast a collection of fancy cookbooks, though they've been gathering dust lately. Ever since I wrote a scathing review that led to Chef Marco's restaurant closure, an uneasy feeling has lingered within me. Maybe it's guilt, but I've tried to push it aside. That evening, I simply craved a quiet dinner at home, hoping to shake off the strange sense of unease. However, a peculiar message on my phone, may it linger in your memory, sent shivers down my spine. Was it a bizarre prank from the restaurant, or was something more sinister at play? As I waited, my anxiety grew. The unnerving quiet was disrupted by the sudden roar of a speeding car outside. It was unnerving, intensifying my apprehension. I attempted to distract myself, but my thoughts kept drifting back to my past reviews. The faces of chefs and restaurant owners flashed before my eyes, their resentment palpable. The memory of Marco's ominous words on the news gnawed at my sanity. What if Marco sought revenge, now working at this very restaurant? The cryptic message and my fear of his retribution played havoc with my mind. Unsure if I was overreacting or if genuine danger lurked, I found myself on edge, anticipating something far more sinister than a simple dinner. When I got my food, there was a scary note inside it, a taste of your own medicine. I knew something was very wrong. I was sure the food was poisoned. Then, out of nowhere, all the lights turned off. I was scared stiff. I heard a loud bang on my front door before it swung open. I knew someone was there to get me, mad about something I said in my work. I grabbed my phone to see in the dark and noticed a figure moving around my living room. My heart was racing. This person seemed to know exactly where to go. This wasn't just random, they were there for me. Feeling my way through my kitchen, I picked up a kitchen knife, trying to protect myself. But the person found me and wrapped their arms around me so hard the knife fell. We struggled. I tried to run, but he kept holding on to me. We ended up falling through the front door out into the hallway. I yelled at the top of my lungs, and my neighbor heard me while coming up the stairs. But the attacker pulled me back into my apartment and shut the door, yelling about how I ruined his life. I kicked at him, and for a little bit, that helped me move closer to the kitchen again where I could grab another knife. But then he gripped my ankles, and I couldn't move. He pulled me closer to him with a rough jerk and started to strangle me. I couldn't breathe, and everything started to blur. Just then, the door flew open. My neighbor had come to help, and at the same time, I could hear police sirens approaching. The attacker ran off, his footsteps echoing down the stairs as he escaped. I was gasping for air, coughing, and trying to calm down. My neighbor stayed with me, making sure I was okay while we waited for the police. We could hear the sirens getting louder, and soon the police were there. They checked the apartment and asked me a lot of questions. I felt so relieved, but also really shaken up. It was over, but I kept thinking about how close I had come to something really bad happening. The police said they would do everything to catch the person who did this. My neighbor was kind, staying with me until I felt safe again. I knew I was lucky to be okay and had someone there to help me when I needed it most. After everything calmed down, the days that followed were really tough for me. I kept thinking about that night, the fear I felt, and how close I was to getting seriously hurt. It was hard to sleep, and every little noise made me jump. I was dealing with these heavy feelings, kind of like when someone has a really bad scare that sticks with them, which I learned was something called PTSD. I started to really think about my job as a food critic. My reviews weren't just words, they had the power to change people's lives, sometimes not in good ways. The person who attacked me was someone I had written about, someone who lost a lot because of my review. It made me wonder if I should be more careful with my words, or maybe change the way I write my reviews. The restaurant that had to close because of my review and the guy who lost his job were all I could think about. I wondered how many others were affected by what I wrote. It was a big wake-up call. I knew I needed to find a way to do my job without causing harm, to be fair and kind but still honest. I talked to other people in the food world, chefs and restaurant owners, to understand their side better. They shared how tough it can be when a bad review comes out. It made me see things differently and think about how I could help instead of hurt. This whole scary experience changed me. It showed me the real impact of my words and made me want to be more responsible with my power as a critic. I was thankful for the support from my neighbor and the police, and I knew I had to use this second chance to make things right, not just for me, but for the people I write about. Listening more carefully makes you notice the dark spots a bit better. The few people I saw were different. They didn't just grab their food and say thanks like most folks. They hung around, looking at me with lots of interest, asking me questions that seemed too personal for a regular delivery run. "How's your health, young man?" one lady asked, her eyes sharp and looking me up and down. "Do you work out?" "You look strong," another guy said, smiling a little too big. It felt like they were checking me out, with more interest than just having a chat. Every time I got back to my car, I felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold night. But nothing freaked me out like my last stop, the big mansion in the middle. It was huge, swallowing up all the light around it. When I rang the bell, the door flew open like they were waiting right behind it. The guy who greeted me was super excited. "Oh, you've brought our special order. Come on in. The mansion inside was as fancy as the outside, guiding me inside with a strong hand on my back. But it wasn't the expensive stuff that made me uneasy, it was the weird feeling in the air, like the whole house was holding its breath. And there I was, in the middle of it all, feeling more and more worried that this delivery wasn't just about dropping off food. As the guy led me through the mansion, my gut feeling got worse. The hallways were so quiet, like nobody else was there, but I could feel eyes watching me from the dark corners. We stopped in front of these giant doors, and he turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your delivery is just in time for our party," he said, pushing the doors open. What I saw inside made me freeze. The room was huge, with a long table set up like something from a long time ago. What really freaked me out was that everyone at the table was wearing masks, creepy ones, not fancy ones, but scary animal masks. And right at the front of the table, an empty chair with a mask waiting for me. As the guy pushed me towards the seat, I noticed decorations around the room that reminded me of old pictures I'd seen in history books, where they talked about doing weird stuff. That's when I saw the table covered in what looked like a map of a person's body, but made out of meat. It wasn't just any meat, it was arranged too perfectly, like they were trying to make a human body out of food. My brain told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "You're the special guest tonight," he said, with a tone that sent shivers down my spine. That's when I realized this wasn't just a strange party, it was something much scarier. They didn't want the food I brought, they wanted me. I was so scared. I turned around, but two more people with masks blocked my way. I looked everywhere for an escape. How could this be real? Doesn't my company know where I am? I'd heard about cannibalism in stories, but I never thought it could be real. Why would these people want to hurt me like this? Then, I saw a small door hidden behind a curtain. I had to make a run for it. I dodged past the masked people who tried to grab me. I could hear them chasing me, their footsteps echoing on the floor. I shut the door behind me and found myself in a dark corridor. I had no choice but to keep going. The corridor twisted and turned like a maze. I could still hear them chasing me, shouting to each other. I stumbled into a kitchen and grabbed a heavy frying pan for protection before running again. Every room in that mansion was scary, but I kept moving. Finally, I saw a bit of light from an open window. I ran towards it as fast as I could, ignoring the voices behind me getting louder and crazier. With all my strength, I pushed myself through the window and fell onto the grass outside. My car was there, and I got in and drove away as fast as possible, not looking back. I drove until I found a gas station. It felt so normal there, a stark difference from what I'd just been through. But even there, I couldn't shake off the fear. When I got back to work, everyone was laughing. They said it was just a prank by the sanctuary. At first I laughed too, but then I started to doubt them. Maybe they were lying to cover up what really happened. That night changed me. I used to be adventurous, always ready to meet new people. Now I'm always on edge, scared of strangers in dark places. I promised myself I'd never take a delivery job again. It's just not worth the risk after what I went through. The memories of that night haunt me. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like I'm back in that mansion, running for my life. It's a reminder that real monsters exist, even if they look like regular people. But I've also learned to trust my instincts more, and maybe I've become a little stronger because of it. but I'll never forget what happened at that sanctuary. It's a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, wearing the faces of ordinary people.